Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight, a Bahamas-born man who was deported to Haiti is back in the country. Find out where he's staying and the next steps in that legal process. Plus, a man killed in the course of a carjacking. Hear what he told police before he died. And Red Nose Day preparations are underway once again at the St. Anne School. We've got these stories and more coming up on Our News.
Brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to Our News and thanks for joining us. I'm Jared Higgs. Topping news tonight, a Bahamas-born man who was deported to Haiti returned to the Bahamas last night and is currently being held at the Carmichael Road Detention Center. 34-year-old John Charles was the subject of a Supreme Court ruling handed down this week by Justice Gregory Hilton. The judgment ordered the Bahamas government to issue Charles with a travel document allowing him to return to the Bahamas from Haiti, as well as grant him status to stay in the Bahamas. According to Attorney General Carl Bethel, Justice Hilton stayed his ruling on Saturday afternoon, and the parties will appear before him on Monday afternoon. The government is appealing Hilton's ruling. Charles is expected to remain at the detention center until that time. The country recorded its latest homicide last night as a man died after being shot during an attempted carjacking. According to police reports, it was shortly after 11 o'clock when a man arrived at the Southern Police Station suffering from a gunshot wound to the body. The man reportedly told police that he was at the junction of East Street and Bowman Street when he was accosted by two men armed with handguns who demanded his vehicle. The man refused and drove off, which is when he says one of the men fired a shot in his direction. Paramedics assisted the man to the hospital, where he later died. Police also reporting the discovery of a firearm in a community in southeastern New Providence. Shortly after 5 yesterday afternoon, officers went to Harrison Square off Yamacraw Road, where they discovered a black Austria Glock 9mm pistol and 49 rounds of ammunition. Nobody was arrested in this matter. On to news from the banking sector as concern mounts over the future of foreign banks in the Bahamas. Royal Fidelity President Michael Anderson is advising Bahamians to adjust. In an interview with Our News on the sidelines of the bank's business economic outlook, Anderson said as banks seek to go digital, this doesn't necessarily mean fewer jobs for people.
Surely there's certain roles in banks that are getting displaced by technology. But as much as certain roles are getting displaced, they're creating new opportunities at other areas. I mean, so the displacement takes place and the branches are closing down because they don't need as many tellers. But the services the banks are offering are becoming greater. So you can do more things through the banks. So the banks are creating more efficiencies in their processes by automating. It hurts certain people, but it benefits certain other people. Certain customers are concerned because they lose the contact with the branch tellers, and tellers are obviously concerned because they lose their jobs. But a number of other customers are happy because they can get many more service than they used to in the past.
Anderson described it as a positive and a negative. Now, when it comes to all those who may have attained degrees in the banking sector and are concerned about the future of their employer in the country, Anderson said there's really only one thing they can do, that's adjust.
Well, banking is changing. And I think the critical thing for most people is to understand what's changing and to figure out how to reposition themselves, re-educate themselves, and continue to re-educate themselves to take advantage of those changes. If you sit there and think that you know everything about what you need to know, the chances are change is going to go way past you and you get left behind. So what we're trying to do is make sure that people understand some of these dynamics and can adjust themselves accordingly.
Housing Minister Romuald Ferreira is touting a recently announced housing program by Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis. The program's aim is to assist first-time homeowners with acquiring extremely low-cost housing. Ferreira is encouraging Bahamians to pay close attention to a recently announced housing program that will allow first-time homeowners to achieve what Ferreira calls the Bahamian dream. It's an ambitious plan, but Ferreira says they're still ironing out the details.
We are aggressively putting in place the logistics as to how that is going to work. The creation of service lots, especially for first-time homeowners in a New Providence setting, because really and truly, you know, I've been saying this all along, and I guess we have to continue to say it, that home ownership is the Bahamian dream.
He says in the current market, most Bahamians simply aren't able to make the step of purchasing a home on their own.
In a New Providence setting, the price of land is unfortunately beyond the reach of the average citizen. When you consider, according to statistics, the average household being headed by a female earning $18,000. I think it's a little under than $18,000 a year. The average cost for a plot of land, $55,000. I mean, you could see the challenges. So what we want to do is put the average person in a situation where they can actually own land. And by selling them the service lot at that price, we're actually giving them equity, because they won't be paying the market value for it. They'll be paying the value of us installing the infrastructure.
Ferreira says he encourages Bahamians to start saving so they can take advantage of this opportunity. The program will also offer duty-free concessions on building materials and will require building to be completed in 2 years. Of course, the major question is, where is the best place to get this land? Family islands like Abaco and Exuma are developing quickly and have some available opportunities. Despite that, Ferreira says there is still an economic challenge on those islands.
Well, this is the challenge, right? In a New Providence setting, essentially everybody lives on the eastern side of the island. Gladstone Road is actually the middle of the island, and if you really think about it, the west is dominated by lakes. And so there, in terms of available land, it's much less, and that's where all the traffic is going. And you have, a large forest estate there as well, which developmental pressure is being put on. So you're absolutely right in what you're saying. The challenge for us is to have the economic incentives in those islands, and this is why you heard the Prime Minister talk about on a recent occasion about wanting to encourage bread and breakfasts in the small family islands, because against the mega development, so we can stimulate the economy and allow Bahamians to have ownership of tourism. Tourism is our #1 industry, but when you really think about it, well, it's no secret. In the book, The Other Side of Paradise, they say that 85 cents out of every tourist dollar leaves the country. And so that speaks to the fact that we don't actually own the industry.
During last night's newscast, we ran a story on the selection of Vianna Gardner as the Chief Operating Officer of the Deliverables Unit in the Office of the Prime Minister. Unfortunately, an image of her sister, Davinia Blair, was used. Our news acknowledges that it was an error on our part, and we do apologize to both sides. Now, when our news comes back, find out what business leaders think about government concessions for large projects. That story and more still to come.